It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
In your 30s, things change a touch.
So, Bo, this is you. This resembles the stage of life you're in where you got children, daughters, you've got the minivan in the driveway, you've got the new house that was bought in the last few years. This seems to me, outside of looking in, there's a lot of things going on, not only in your life, but financially, obligations that you built up as well.
Absolutely. There are 1,000 things pulling you in 1,000 different directions. It may be work, it may be family, it may be social, it may be community. In your 30s, it's hard because you feel literally like you're being pulled apart at the seams. So if you're going to think about how to get my mindset right from building wealth and making sound financial decisions, the first thing you have to understand is what is the balance that makes sense for you and your circumstance? How do I balance all of these different things? Most likely, you're trying to figure out how to balance work with the other things that have going on, like family or like community or like physical health or like fill in the blank. You have to do a real assessment in your 30s of where am I going to prioritize my time, and maybe even more importantly, where am I not going to prioritize my time that's not taking me towards my ultimate why?
Well, I want to go down this same line of thinking, but it's one of those things where I had a lot of jobs growing up. I mean, I could probably, and I didn't talk about this in show prep, but between the lifeguarding, bus driving, substitute teaching, plumbing, Hardee's fast food, I mean, those are all jobs.
Sure.
Not a single one of those things was a career. And I think that is something that as we transition into success mindset is we have to figure out how do we quit having jobs and start having the career that's going to give me the opportunity for the future. And unfortunately, through our research, we found that 19% of Americans are really unhappy with their job.
Yeah, and that's kind of sad to me. I mean, that's what, like 1 in 5, right? It's really hard to have a healthy, productive mindset if the thing that you spend the most time doing every week is something that you're just not happy about, that you're upset about, that makes you, I think you're the one who, the first person that says, who bites their fingernails on Sunday night before they go to work. Man, it's going to be hard to keep a healthy mindset if that is your everyday, day in, day out activity.
Well, and there's also something else that happens, I feel like, in your 30s, is that you move into that new neighborhood and you think, hey, I'm out of high school, so all this comparison stuff was, I put that in my rearview mirror in high school and college, and then you move in a neighborhood and you realize, nope, this whole keeping up with the Joneses is a legitimate risk or concern that you have to pay attention to. Don't try to keep up with your neighbors. Comparison or being green with envy, all that does is it's a thief of your joy and your happiness. Right. Try to wake up and figure out what is the thing you're going to do today to improve yourself. Don't worry about the neighbors because believe me, behind closed doors, they got their own struggles. That's right. Quit trying to keep up.
All right, so we've got our mindset right in our 30s. What are the behaviors we ought to put in place to get our money right? Well, the first one is that investing 20 to 25% is a non-negotiable at this point. In your 20s, you had so much time that if your savings rate faltered a little bit, it's okay because time was going to cover that for you. By the time you get to your 30s, time starts catching up with you a little bit. Now, it's true, your dollars in your 30s are still incredibly valuable. We know that for a 20-year-old, $1 can turn into 88. But for a 30-year-old, that $1 can only, I say only in air quotes, turn into $23. That is still super, super exciting. That's something that should still get you juiced. But by the time it gets to 40, your multiple drops to 7. So you have to get serious about your savings behavior in your 30s.
So a lot of you watching this, and I don't know if you watched the 20 section now that we're in the 30s, a lot of you are starting to have the question of, hey, that's great, but I'm 23 or I'm 34, I'm 42. I'd love to know my specific number. I want to invite you to go to moneyguy.com/resources. We actually have on a wealth multiplier deliverable for you, a free deliverable. you can actually pull your exact age, see what the opportunity that every dollar in your army of dollar bills can become.
Now, I think it's always interesting. We talk about this deliverable and we talk about this 88 times over concept. And every now and then somebody asks me, guys, why don't you but what if you do better than the market? What if you make 12%? Or what if the market doesn't do good and you make 5%? That's a common fallacy that young folks fall into, thinking about, well, what about my rate of return? Or what about this? Unfortunately, that's just not something you can control to a huge extent. What you're going to get from an investment standpoint is usually what the market's going to deliver. If we go into a period with high returns, there's a good chance you'll get high returns. If you go into a period of low returns, then you're likely going to have a lower return. When you're in your 30s, your saving rate is still more important than your rate of return. That's why we talk about your money multiplier. We don't say, well, if you save $95 and it earns 12%, you'll have this much. We would rather you focus on the percentage you're saving because that's something that does fit squarely in your onus of control.
You said something that ties in directly to this. You said things that you can control. I think a lot of times we get busy doing nothing in the fact that we overthink things that are completely out here. Like nobody knows what the stock market's going to do next week. We don't know what's going to happen from a social, from a geopolitical standpoint. There's all kind of things that you have zero control about. But guess what you do control? You control how much you pay in fees. You can control how you plan for your taxes. And for goodness sake, you can control how you create an automated wealth building machine by making sure that you are saving, paying yourself first, funding those Roth IRAs, investing in those index target retirement funds. You have no excuses in making this happen.
Now, I think what's really interesting, Brian, is we have a very unique audience out there, full of financial mutants who are very high achievers. And so we have a lot of folks in the 30s who say, guys, I hear you and I understand all the stuff you're focusing on, but man, my stuff has gotten complicated and I'm so busy. I'm working like a gazillion hours. And when I'm not working that gazillion hours, I'm with my kids a gazillion hours. I just don't have time for all of it. It's not uncommon for high achievers that fall into that category that the 30s may be the segment, maybe the period of time when it does make sense getting professional help. Recognizing I can't do it all, so I'm going to bring in a professional to help me navigate these financial waters.
I mean, think about when you are if you're like going for a promotion or doing anything that requires you to be as efficient with resources as possible. What's the first thing they try to figure out? First, how technically good are you? And then they're like, okay, can this person delegate on the things that they don't need to be doing? That's a skill set that you're going to see a common trend in your 30s, 40s, and 50s. Don't be scared to seek help. We're going to load you up with all the free advice, but there will come a point that you might want to graduate to the next level. All
right, so we've talked about your mindset, and we've talked about getting your money right. Let's talk a little bit about some of the minefields that exist in the 30s decade. Again, the first one I think is sort of this risk metric. Your emergency fund has to be a non-negotiable because at the end of the day, for most of us, like if we're 20 years old and something goes wrong, okay, we can probably like move back in with mom and dad, or we can couch surf, or we can fill in the blanks. When you're in your 30s, and you got a spouse, and you got some kids, and you got a mortgage, there's a lot more that goes along with that. So you better make sure that you've got that 3 to 6 month of expense bucket filled up in case that horrible Tuesday comes along.
The next one is kind of a review. It's that drifting expenses where you don't really know what you're spending. You're trying to keep up with the Joneses even though they're broke. You need to watch the ever expanding expenses and trying to just go at it. It's not just food you have to worry about. We always hear about, our expanding waistlines. Worry about, are you spending every dollar that comes in your possession? That's a mistake.
And then the last thing, we talk about sort of risk management. Obviously, emergency reserves is a piece of that. But there are other things that you ought to be thinking about, like, do I have appropriate life insurance if there are people who depend on my income? Do I have disability insurance if there are people that depend on my income? Do I have umbrella insurance if I have resources that I want to protect? If I have young children, or if I have a spouse, or if I have debt, do I have wills and estate documents in place that say what my wishes are if I were not here to speak on my behalf? In your 30s, you have to make sure these things happen because, again, you don't know when something unfortunate is going to happen, without these protections in place, you may not just be flying naked. You may have your entire family flying naked.
And I'm just dropping in, don't forget wills. If you
Wills,
got kids, we pick on you if we find out you have children and you don't have the wills and estate documents, because if you think it's messy talking about uncomfortable things with family while you're alive, try to do it when you're not even here. It gets really ugly, so don't overlook that. Now, Bo, talk to us about some hard numbers. How do we actually build this millionaire life? What's the numbers required?
So if you're beginning to save, starting at age 30, you would need to save about $270 a month starting at 30 all the way till 65 to reach $1 million by the time you get to 65. If you wait until 35, you have to save about $452 a month. But perhaps you were that person that started saving in your 20s. If you hit your 30th birthday and you've accumulated $43,359, you are already on track without saving another dollar to be a millionaire. At 35, the number you want to hit to be a millionaire is to have saved $78,787 by your 35th birthday.
And if you're a prodigious accumulator of wealth, meaning you want to double these numbers, it's basic math, but I'll give you the numbers anyway. For the 30-year-old, it's $540 a month. For $2 million, 35-year-old, it's a little over $900 a month. If you're trying to figure out lump sums that make sure you get there, $2 million at retirement. For the 30-year-old, it's $86,000, close to $87,000 at the beginning, and then for the 35-year-old, it's $157,000.